Well, Lou, I'm here with Steve Hyden, and we're gonna get into a proper intro in a few minutes. But before we started rolling, Steve jumped in to with his desire to discuss Unfrosted, which I feel like you made a point. Could you just make the point again? And then we're going to talk about Bruce Springsteen today. And
Yeah.
this is a very special episode of Office Hours with one of my favorite music writers, Steve Hyden. I'll give you a proper intro, but let's do this cold open where you tell me your thoughts on Unfrosted.
Yeah. Well, I saw the clip of you talking about the Jerry Seinfeld Pop Tart movie, and I assumed that, Tim is going to crap on this movie like everyone else has. And I thought
Hmm.
your take was really interesting. You weren't saying it was like the funniest movie you'd ever seen, but you seemed sympathetic to what Seinfeld was trying to do, and you were actually kinder to it than a lot of people I've seen talking about it. And it was interesting to me because I thought when I was watching it, I didn't finish it. I had to
Uh-huh.
bail on it. But
Okay, fair enough.
when I was watching it, it did occur to me that, this would be a better movie if someone like Tim Heidecker did it.
Let me just set this up. So people listening, just want to introduce you formally. Steve Hyden is a music critic, an author, a podcast host. He's the author of Your Favorite Band Is Killing Me, Twilight of the Gods, The Long Road, about Pearl Jam's influence on a generation, co-host of the podcast IndieCast, and you do a podcast with our friends, the Jokermen.
Never-ending stories.
And you're a writer for Uprocks. You're always putting out these terrific lists. You're making these big decisions about the order of things of people's careers. I love that.
Yeah.
And I've gotten to. You've interviewed me, and now it's time for me to interview you, because you've got a new book coming out about one of my favorite artists, Bruce Springsteen, called "There Was Nothing You Could Do," about born in the USA and that record's cultural impact. And I read it. You sent me a copy a few months ago. I devoured it. There's nothing I love more than these kinds of books. And I can, we could talk about this genre in general too, or like the rock book genre,
Yeah.
and what works about it and what doesn't work about it sometimes. Like, I'm holding off on reading the Mal Evans book for some reason. That might be too into the weeds, but
I'm intrigued by that one too.
Break. Yeah,
I mean,
go ahead.
Yeah, I was just gonna say, Mal Evans, for those who don't know, the Beatles roadie.
Yes,
and one of the people in the inner circle, like from the beginning, really, of at least their superstar career. I don't know if he goes back to like Germany and all that.
I think he goes back to the Cavern. I know. I think he might not have been in Hamburg, but he was there. He was like a roadie at the Cavern. I'm not a roadie, a doorman, like a security guy. And you see him in the Get Back movie with the anvil. He's the
right.
Yeah,
and
he's very.
He seems like a very sweet guy. And then, do you know about how he died?
Yes, terrible. I mean, I don't know all the details. I know he was shot by the LAPD. Like, it was like a murder by suicide by cop kind of situation.
Yeah.
Maybe.
Yeah, and I don't know all the details of that, but it's a very, obviously a very tragic ending. But you just think of the guy in Get Back hitting the anvil, and then you remember that's how he went out. It's a very incongruous situation, but I don't know. I'm sure that's a fascinating book. The thing with Beatles books is that there's a million of them, but there's a million of them for a reason. It's like Greek mythology. You can just hear those stories over and over again.
I know. There's a good one. The one I just did read. It's an audiobook that I experienced, was the Peter Brown book, which was a book he wrote about. He had written it like in the 1980 or 1982, and he had interviewed everybody in the inner circle. And, he was in the inner circle. Peter Brown calls, say, you can make it okay. You can get married in Gibraltar near Spain. Peter Brown, he basically interviewed everybody and he recorded everyone. And what this book is the transcripts of everybody. It's pretty good. He interviews Alan Klein. He interviews Yoko, like people that you don't always hear their side of the story because I think Paul and Ringo and that side of it has really done such a good job of controlling the whole narrative. But and it was contemporaneous, sort of. It was like done in the late 70s. So you're hearing like what Paul thinks of John, months before John Lennon is killed.
Right,
so it's
right.
like it's not this revisionist history so much.
I have the audio book of that Mark Lewisohn book, like where he's writing.
That's
the enormous. I think it's going to be 3 volumes. In the first volume,
it's like the rise and fall of the Roman Empire, kind of,
or like that Lyndon Johnson book that that Robert Caro wrote. But it's like 45 hours. This book, and it's up until and it's like even before they become famous. It's like just their early life.
Well, I mean the joke I have about that book is it starts in the year 1846 or something. that's where like. And I think it goes like the end of that volume is like 1962 is like, and it's 600 pages, right? So it's like, but I loved it. I think it really changed the way I thought about a lot of things with them. But again, we're not here to talk about Unfrosted. We're not here to talk about the Beatles. We're here to talk about Bruce, the boss. Tell me a little bit about this book. Specifically what your sort of thesis for this book was, and did you go into writing this book timing it with the 40th anniversary? Did you feel like that was coming and you're like, not to say that you're being manipulative or cynical, but did it seem like this was the time to sort of like reassess Born in the USA and talk about it a little more seriously?
Yeah, I mean, to answer your question, yes. Like I did have the 40th anniversary in mind and thinking, if the book comes out around then, that might be a way to encourage people to write about it. Like that's certainly something that crossed my mind, the marketing side of my brain. But, I've been wanting to write about Bruce for a long time, and he pops up in some of my other books too. Like he's in 3 of my other books. I write about Bruce a bit. But the problem with Bruce is that there's, like the Beatles, there's so many books about Springsteen, and it was trying to figure out like what would be the right vehicle to talk about him. And, eventually I just hit upon Born in the USA, which it's the kind of record that I think is interesting on its own, like the era that it came out of and how it's intertwined with Nebraska and how it became this huge phenomenon, all that stuff. But then there's also everything around the record, what it said about America at the time, what it says about rock music. And it seemed like it was a good opportunity to write about the changes that have happened in culture in the last 40 years, and also in Bruce Springsteen's own career. So like the book, it talks about not just the record; it talks about his career leading up to the Born in the USA and his career afterward. And the central thesis of the book basically is that the albums before Born in the USA are really setting the stage for Bruce becoming the phenomenon that he became in the mid-'80s. And then the albums after are, in a way, reacting to that, whether he's running away from it or learning to embrace it again. So it's not my favorite Bruce Springsteen record. I love it. But to me, it was the most interesting one to write about.
It is crazy to think, because you have what's the first, like, what's Greetings from Asbury Park, 73, 74, 73?
70, yeah.
So you have Bruce as this, slowly climbing this ladder of success, and, by the river, I guess you have, I mean, in my mind, I always think of Born to Run as this, where he becomes globally famous, or he becomes the icon Bruce Springsteen. But that's not really true. I mean, it became such a staple of classic rock stations for me growing up. And I think post Born in the USA, you get a lot of people finding that record, or, you get a lot of that gets swept up into the mythology. But he still isn't really, he's still like I don't know, you wouldn't say an underground artist, because he's on a major label and he's playing arenas and stuff, but he's not necessarily like a household name through the 70s.
Born to Run comes out, that record's a big hit, but you do see this pattern with Bruce where he has the big success and then he retreats a little bit, like with Darkness on the Edge of Town. At the time, that was looked at as not a very commercial record. He didn't do much promotion for it. There was a lot of feeling about Born to Run that it was like this overhyped record. He was on the cover of Time and Newsweek famously the same week.
The new Dylan or something like that.
Yeah, all that. And there's stories about just Bruce being really uncomfortable with all of the hype around that record. And he scales back with Darkness. The River comes out. He has Hungry Heart. It's a top 10 hit. First big pop hit for him. And then after The River, of course, you move into this era where he's working on Nebraska and Born in the USA at the same time. And Nebraska obviously is another retreat type record in a way. And then Born in the USA comes out and it sells, 15 million some copies and has 7 top 10 hits. Just the epitome of a monster 80s record in the mold of like Thriller or Purple Rain, like these albums that just stick around forever and just keep putting out hit singles. Which is something you don't really see anymore. Like a record that can just linger forever, or not, for like 18 months in the cultural zeitgeist.
And somehow he doesn't, like, the record is a sonic departure from maybe the sound you're used to from Bruce a little bit. I mean, you get the introduction of the Yamaha CS80. You get the synthesizer. I was trying to be too cute here, but it is, and I'm not looking at notes. I mean, that's just from my memory.
Yeah, I know, off the dome.
But that's synth. That we get a synth sound from Bruce, but he doesn't lose his audience. He, exponentially gains an audience. I mean, you like going from arenas to stadiums. Pretty significant. I don't think he was doing stadiums before Born in the USA.
Yeah, I mean, The River, I think, was approaching that type of level, and then it really blows up. I mean, Bruce, and I think this is still true today, like, I mean, the early 80s was the beginning of him going into Europe, and now he's, like, bigger in Europe than he is in America. Like, he's talked about that. And, like, the stadium part of the Born in the USA tour started in Europe and then it came to America. But yeah, the synthesizer thing is interesting. And I'm kind of curious about your own journey with Bruce. I don't know if you want to get into that, but because I read in the book about how I heard this album when I was like really little, when I was 6 years old. And it was one of the first albums that I remember hearing as an album. It was this album, obviously Thriller. If you're around our age, like Thriller was just part of the world. You didn't even have to be a Michael Jackson fan. It was like a record that was just issued to like every young person at the time. But yeah, Born in the USA I loved, and I loved it before I really even knew anything about Bruce Springsteen. He was just a pop star. He was a guy on MTV. Yeah. And the synthesizer, I think, was it was one of the things that made him feel like a mainstream artist, because that was becoming more of a dominant thing.
Yeah, it was smart. It strategically, I don't think it was that callously strategic where they're trying to make it sound like everything else on the radio, but it did probably have, Bruce wants, part of Bruce, and I'm sure John Landau and everybody else wants to be as big as possible. They want to sell as many records as possible. They want to reach as many people. And I'm sure at that point, there's the conversation and the desire to make it sound current and fit in with what else is on the radio to some degree. I think that can happen organically, but I'm sure it's in the, these people that get this big it's not just accidental. There's pain and work and deliberation to get to that place. And I'm sure part of that is just like, this is what Prince is doing, man. Like, we got to get on it. You got to stay on top of it.
Well, it seems like it was fairly organic in that, my friend Brian Hyatt, he wrote a Springsteen book, and I quoted in my book, he interviewed Roy Bittan, the keyboard player in the E Street Band, and it sounds like Roy was the one who brought the synthesizer to the sessions. Like, it was something that he had picked up,
right?
And it wasn't something that he was directed to do, but it was something that Bruce, I think, recognized fairly early on was, oh, this is like musical dry ice smoke. It creates atmosphere on my records. And it's one of the things that links the songs on Born in the USA. You think of the synths on I'm on Fire or Downbound Train. It is like this cloud of moodiness that exists. And it's not like a Rick Wakeman type synth. It's not like an elaborate type thing. It's pretty simple. Like
it's just pads. It's pads.
Right.
It's like,
but it's very effective. One
thing
I think
I was just gonna say I love records that have that kind of glue, that for like random ones that I can think of, like Dylan's Desire has Scarlet Riviera and Emmylou Harris on it, and they kind of play throughout the record in different ways, and there's lots of examples of that. But it just says like this is meant, all these songs belong together, not just thematically but sonically as well.
Or you think about the way Dylan used organ in the mid-'60s.
Yeah.
And how that became something that a lot of other people picked up on, like Tom Petty and the Heartbreakers had that same organ sound. Even like E Street Band has that on, Born to Run, Darkness on the Edge of Town era. And I think Born in the USA was one of the records that brought the synthesizer into that heartland rock type sound. Like if you think about the Killers or War on Drugs or something, like that's something that they pick up on.
For sure. I could tell you. Yeah. Oh, so go ahead, Steve.
I was going to say it's interesting to me with this record because I think, again, you and I are around the same age, so I don't know if you were already a Bruce fan in the '90s.
Well,
or anything.
I was going to give you my and the audience's history of my Bruce love, but is that a good time to do that?
Because I was just going to say, I feel like in the '90s, his like a record like Born in the USA and even like Tunnel of Love were looked at as being dated because of the synthesizers. And,
totally.
But then 20 years after those records came out, those sounds came back into vogue in like indie rock and whatever.
Big time.
The records didn't change, but the way they were perceived changed. But like the alt rock '90s though, or grunge, if that's what you liked, Born in the USA maybe sounded kind of corny in the '90s.
Oh, for sure. I mean, I think about like even with Bon Iver, like the way he tapped into like this kind of Bruce Hornsby sound,
right?
Which was shocking and great, but very like, oh my God, this was very recently very uncool.
Right.
And you just figured out a way to tap into it. But definitely the War on Drugs. And my last record, high school, we had the CS80 pumping in the back of a bunch of things, giving some atmosphere. But I'm about your age, and I would say Bruce for me is totally ubiquitous. Like I can't remember any period of time where he's not around as a cultural person in my life. I think so. This comes out in 1980, right? Born in the USA.
84.
So 84. I'm sorry. Yeah, that makes more sense. The River is 80, right?
Right. Yeah.
So in 1984, I'm 8, right? 76. Wait, I'm born in 76. I'm 8 in 1984. So I'm probably just finding music, finding MTV, and there's if you're watching MTV in 1984, you are seeing a lot of Bruce Springsteen. You're seeing Dancing in the Dark video with Courtney Cox. You're seeing Glory Days. Glory Days is probably the first big memory of something on MTV. That video is very, evocative.
Yeah.
And my dad was a fan. He had gotten the tape. I can picture the cassette tape. And I could hear "Cover Me" on the radio. That song was on the radio a lot. "Born in the USA," of course. And then I don't. It's funny because then I think Bruce kind of drops off like after those probably 2 or 3 years of the "Born in the USA" cycle. You get "Tunnel of Love," which I'm now not into because I'm probably into heavy metal and rap and stuff. Like suddenly he goes from like the most important, hottest thing to kind of dad music, like within one album, right?
Right. Yeah, he's got the bolo tie and the suit.
Yeah,
writing about relationships,
divorce.
Yeah,
but then I think as a high schooler, I get into the classic rock, 60s and 70s. I am a Rolling Stones subscriber. I learn about I learn about the first wave. So I get Greetings from Asbury Park, and I get the Young and the Wild E Street Shuffle. I start to really like that because it's in that canon of Dylan, Tom Petty, the Stones, all that stuff. He's in that mix, and I'm a fan. I've got all those CDs. And then I think in college I dig into the Darkness record, which you kind of have to be in college, I think, or later to get to appreciate.
Right.
And I did, and I think in post college you start getting, for us at least, I think you start getting the revisionist indie rock mindset of Nebraska. It's sort of around the same time where people are rediscovering Ram from McCartney,
right?
Where people are going, well, I know Bruce Springsteen just put out fucking Lucky Town and he's lame, but you guys should check out Nebraska. It's actually fucking good, and you're like, really? Oh, cool. I didn't know that I could like Bruce Springsteen again. I think I always liked Bruce Springsteen, but I didn't go that deep, and I didn't maybe know about Nebraska or didn't pay attention to Nebraska. But then, yeah, so in that 2001, this all tracks for you, right? Like 2001, 2002, I think there's like people saying Nebraska is fucking cool. And I'm like, well, I like all of it. Have you guys heard Darkness? Do you know about Racing in the Streets? Like this is not a aberration here.
Right.
And yeah, so I think that I post Nebraska, I think, or post Born in the USA, I think I really liked when I liked that record Magic that came out that has that great song, Girls in Their Summer Clothes,
right?
Which blew me away. I go, like, how do you, a guy can still pump out something like so anthemic and beautiful, and he sounds like he's having fun getting like a 60s Phil Spector kind of sound going in the studio. And yeah, so and I liked the Wrecking Ball record. I think kind of had cool things about it. He got real political again, and like kind of went through that phase. And I'll wrap my appreciation of Bruce up by just saying, I think now we're in sort of like an Elvis Costello, I'm a music aficionado of genres kind of phase, right? Like I'm going to take a step back from a songwriter Bruce and, explore different subgenres of music, the way that Elvis Costello, did his various Burt Bacharach and string quartets. He's like, it feels slightly like I'm going to figure out different ways of making records that don't necessarily need me to be the lead idea generator, song wise. But
Right. So like you're thinking of, well, obviously there was that Soul Covers record that he did, which
yeah,
I have no interest in. I have to
yeah,
say that's
yeah,
not my favorite side of Bruce. Um,
yeah.
Western Stars, which was him writing songs, but it
That
was
was
like,
original. Yeah,
but that was more of a genre exercise. Him,
yeah,
doing like the Western, like the California singer songwriter type
yeah.
vibe, and wearing the
Glenn
cowboy
Campbell.
hat. Yeah, all that thing.
He did like
Um,
the Pete Seeger kind of with like the Irish.
we shall overcome.
It's all good. Yeah, it's all
Yeah.
cool. It's just like it's interesting. Like as an artist gets older and older, how they manage to find new ways to not reinvent, because I don't think there's any reinvention going on, but you know, spice. Get a new lacquer of paint on the outside of their house, kind of attitude. But
Yeah, like Letter to You is interesting because that's almost him proving that he can still sound like he did in the 70s. Like there was an
mhm.
interview that he did in Rolling Stone where he was talking about all these lost albums that he has. There's tons of still unreleased music, and he was saying that I can still sing in my voice from 1978, or I could sing in my voice from 1984, or I could sing in my voice from 73, which seemed like a little bit. I don't know. He seems pretty damn raspy. I don't know how flexible he really is, but there are songs on Letter to You where he does plug
He
into
goes
that
there.
darkness, like that song "Janie Needs a Shooter," which actually is an old
Yeah,
song, but
right.
that's a great just throwback Bruce
Yeah,
Springsteen
I
song.
like that. I like that record. I think I really wish some of these guys would. I think Dylan is a good example of doing it right, because I don't think he's working with one of these hot shot producers. I think there is this, like that new Stones record I fucking hate. Did you like it?
I have some affection for it, but I am such a easy A when it comes to the Stones. Like I'll defend Bridges to Babylon, to people. So,
Yeah.
but I know what you mean about the
Well, maybe
sound.
that's
It's a
the maybe
very
that's the way I am. Maybe I'm the same way with Jerry Seinfeld. Like whatever. Like you should be more critical of the Rolling Stones. Like why do they get
right,
a free pass? But
right.
um, yeah, I just think like when these guys end up getting these young, I can't remember this guy's name who works with all these old timers. Producer, you probably know,
Andrew
but
Watt. Andrew Watt is his name.
yeah,
Yeah,
I
it's a very
just think
plasticky type of sound that he
yeah.
gets.
Yeah, and I think Bruce, I think he works with who? Brendan O'Brien, is that his name?
He's worked with him like
Maybe not.
recently. He has like an in-house guy that whose name escapes me, but he did work with Brendan O'Brien for a while. I mean, Dylan, I think, is just been producing himself really since Time Out of Mind. I think Jack Frost, he produces under that name.
Yeah, Jack Frost. Yeah.
I mean, I was
Um,
curious about like your feelings about Bob versus Bruce. I mean, because I write about this a bit in the first chapter of the book about
yeah,
Bruce being influenced by like Elvis and Bob Dylan, these other sort of great men
yeah,
archetypes in rock history, and how in a lot of ways they're opposing archetypes. But I'm fascinated by the relationship between Bob and Bruce because it does feel
yeah,
like sometimes I think Bob admires Bruce in a lot of ways, but I also feel like at times maybe he resents Bruce and wants to make fun of him in a good natured
yeah,
way, because they are different
yeah.
in a lot of ways, like the way they approach their careers, performing or in the studio. I mean, they're very different.
So different. I mean, very, very different. Of course, I think you just don't have Bruce Springsteen without
Of
Bob.
course. Of course.
You just don't. You don't have so many things without Bob. Um, So there is that feeling, I guess, that you can understand of Bob being like, I made everything that you have, like, but I don't know how, I mean, at some point you get over that and you go, whatever. The kid's good and he seems like a nice guy, I think the differences are vast. I mean, I think musically, Bruce Springsteen is much more gifted, like if just from a singing and guitar playing, and just seems that he has more talent in the actual music I mean, the combination of Elvis. I mean, it's Elvis. It's Bob. I mean, it's Elvis. It's Bob. It's James Brown. It's Little Richard. Like from a performer standpoint, there's nobody better, I think, as an entertainer than Bruce Springsteen. Like
Right.
one of the greatest. Like you can watch that I watched that No Nukes concert that came out recently. Have you seen that?
Oh yeah.
Oh my God. Like it's unbelievable what he does with the audience, with his body, because his guitar playing is exceptional. Like he's the guy soloing on all those songs, right? Like
very slept on as a guitar player. People don't talk about him as one of the greats.
He's crazy good. He's for 3 hours. He's running in a full flop sweat, jumping on top of the piano, flying across the stage, totally engaged emotionally with the songs. Like Bob's not doing any of that. You know what I mean? Like you get a little of that in Rolling Thunder, where he's just on cocaine. You know,
right.
Which I love that move. I love those concerts. I think that's like prime him as a performer. But
oh yeah, no doubt.
But I think Bruce is probably like a better. I mean, he's definitely like seems like a guy that's worked on himself in a much more productive way, or he's just seems to have a good family. He's never been very antagonistic to the public or to the press. Like he's kind of like the anti-Bob in that way. Like,
right.
But there's also not as much originality in Bruce, maybe not as much coming out of nothing is this thing. Like there's such a root in other things that Bruce provides for us. It's not.
Yeah,
it's so rooted in many things. And Bob too. Bob didn't come out of nowhere. He's obviously coming from folk traditions, and he's not like a full broken mold situation. But
the thing with Bob is, you're talking about Springsteen as this ultimate showman, which he is, and Dylan isn't. But one of the great things about Dylan is that he's not that. If you love Bob Dylan, you love that he is a guy who isn't going to give you what you want, but it will be the thing that you want in 10 years. It'll be like he's going to give you this record of standards from like the mid 20th century. And you're going to be like, why is he doing 3 albums of this? And then one day you're going to be in a perfect moment to hear those records, and you'll be like, it's genius that he did this.
Yes.
And yes. Bruce doesn't have that kind of thing going for him. That's really just Bob's thing. But you're right. I mean, there wouldn't be a Springsteen without Bob. And also Springsteen maybe wouldn't have made the decisions that he made, that he learned. Like he learned what not to do from Bob too, just like he learned what not to do from Elvis in a lot of ways.
Well, he was so very strategic. And I mean, we could talk about that, the way he deliberated, the way he took time to make all those records in that period, and the pain that he seemed to go through with it all. Like, and how I think it's probably something now that he says he went through extensive therapy. I mean, there's great stories that I think are in your book, and I think might be in his own autobiography. The one that really struck me, I think it's in his autobiography is great. That's a great, beautiful piece of work.
One of the best audiobooks too of all time.
Oh, I've never did the audiobook. I would do that.
You have to.
I was sitting on the corner of Bedford and drinking some warm beers with Mary.
It is peak raspiness. It's this raspiness at your eardrums for like 16 hours. It's a beautiful thing.
It's a bummer is that Bob didn't do the audiobook for his. I mean, Sean Penn did a pretty good job. Yeah, I think I just listened to that recently, but I just want to hear Bob talk about meeting Tiny Tim. up in, up in Times Square.
Especially, he should have done it
I
for
know.
Philosophy of Modern Song at least, because
Oh, I think he
that
did some of that.
he did some of it, but I think there's like a cast of
Right.
celebrities who read that one because that's written more like the theme time radio hour
Yeah, yeah.
entry. So it'd be
Meaning somebody else wrote it.
right. It's like
But
this woman was a beast. She killed me. You know,
yeah, I couldn't get
she,
enough.
she left me in a ditch, bloody, dying, but I loved it. You know, like that kind of prose.
Yeah, he's a great writer. I mean, obviously he's a great
Uh,
writer. I wish he'd write like pulp fiction, like he'd write some like mystery novels or something. He should start doing that. That's a new angle.
he may have like
Rum,
a
rum,
back. There might be like
yeah,
a backlog of books that comes out after he passes. You know,
yeah.
just knowing him or some weird backlog of material, welded statues or something that he's hoarding in Malibu, or because he's like into welding. Bob Dylan,
Yes.
it's like one of his
Yeah,
hobbies.
look that up, folks. If you don't know, Bob Dylan makes big gates, and you know who has one? My friend. This is funny. My friend does. He's a videographer, director guy, and he does a lot of work with, like Elton John Foundation, and he does a lot of work with the presidents, like for their charity groups. Like he makes films for them. Like EPKs or whatever you want to call it. And he got to be sort of pals with Bill Clinton, because he's making these films about the Clinton Foundation, where they
Wow.
suck the adrenochrome out of kids and turn it into the vaccine. But he goes, I was walking around he was showing me his garden area, and yeah, you see that gate? Bob Dylan gave that to me. He's like, what? He had no idea what he was talking about. But yeah, Bob Dylan makes big iron gates.
Yeah, man of
Um,
many talents.
but
Yeah, yeah. Bruce, I
wait,
don't know
so
if he has those kind of hobbies. You never hear about Bruce's hobbies. Bruce is,
no,
and he
these
seems like
motorcycles, I
horse.
guess. I don't
Right,
cars. I loved,
right.
well, there's so many great things. I brought his autobiography up because recently I think I think Bruce, like Bob and like a lot of these guys, like they come back to you in different parts of your life as you get older and as I go through the changes I'm going through and personal life, family, career. And then, there's these guys that are ahead of you, like Bruce, where you reconnect with them on a different level. And the one thing that hit me, I think this was in his book, but I think it might have also come back up in the other big Bruce book that came out last year, the Deliver Me from Nowhere about Nebraska, which, I mean, I don't know how you feel about it. I think that book and your book make the best two for Bruce. I mean, it's almost like it's an unintentional sequel to his book. It came out perfectly because I had read that book and then you sent me your book and it was like, this is what
Yeah,
I was craving. I wanted to read more about this period. Um,
yeah.
but
Hopefully, other people feel the same way because I think that's true, and also because of the subject matter, and also we took different approaches to it.
yeah, for
So
sure.
hope, yeah,
It wasn't redundant in any way. But there's a part of that book where, and maybe you remember this, where he's driving across country after having kind of like a nervous breakdown. I
right.
think before, like right after the river, maybe, right? Is it
Hmm.
right after the river?
Yeah,
Or around that time, definitely before Nebraska and Born in the U.S.A. But he's driving across country to California where he eventually lands into a psychoanalyst's arms, literally like collapses or just kind of starts weeping. But on his way out there, he stops at this county fair and he has this totally existential observation watching the people in wherever he is, Minnesota or Iowa or something,
I think it's
you know,
Texas.
Texas. And
Yeah,
he's just like, I can't have this. I can't have this life. I am an outsider. I'm a carnival. I'm an artist. I'm a carny, essentially. I can't have a normal life. I am a man. I'm a man on the road, and this, melancholy or depression about that feeling, I totally relate to, and you realize that you do have because it's this feeling of looking at a community and being like, I don't have a community, I don't have a family, I don't have anything. I want that. I want the dad with the cotton candy, looking at his kid on the roller coaster. But I think you eventually realize that no one really feels that connected to their own communities in the way that it might look. And secondly, that you do have a community and you do have a family, and it is just different. It doesn't look like it looks on the cover of Life magazine necessarily. But it struck me as like the feeling like you are and it's also because his work, his vocation in life is to observe, and us, and I feel the same way in a lot of ways. We are observers of the world and the culture. We're not always active participants in it, and it can be kind of alienating and lonely.
I think Bruce in particular, though, is a loner. Like he wasn't in the Traveling Wilburys,
No.
He wasn't. You don't really see him hanging out with other people all that often. Like he'll drop in and appear on someone's record, but someone like Tom Petty, for instance, seemed like he was a great hang and just had a lot of famous friends, and going over to George Harrison's house and playing ukuleles. That famous story. That story you were telling about the cross country trip, which I write about a bit in my book too, because it is an important part of the creation story of Born in the USA. But he had a quote after Born in the USA came out. I think it was for the album. It was for the album cycle for Tunnel of Love, and he had a quote, and I'm paraphrasing here a little bit, but he said something like, "I went out on the Born in the USA tour, and I talked a lot about community, but I wasn't part of a community."
Yeah,
and he was talking about how, this is around the time he meets Patty. He's going to start having kids. He's going to start having a personal life.
Yeah,
for the first time, and how that really became, I think, more important to him than being Bruce Springsteen and making records, as it should be. I mean, he was entering his 40s. It was a new part of his life. It is interesting with Springsteen, like in the last 10 years, because I feel like he has been more forthcoming about his personal life and the struggles that he's gone through. Certainly with mental health, he writes about that a lot in his book Born to Run. There was also Springsteen on Broadway. He talks about that stuff. That's great. That. And I love the bit at the beginning where he says something like, I've never worked a 9-to-5 job until this show.
Yeah, he's a character. He admits, he's like, I created a character. I'm an archetype. I don't know anything about cars. But
I'm not a working man. I'm not, and that to me also feels like a reaction to the icon that Born in the USA created. People had this perception of who he was based on that record, and it was before that too. But that record was just so mainstream and iconic, and it's still, I think, the record that if you ask the average person about Bruce Springsteen, like picture him in your mind, it's the Bruce of Born in the USA. I mean, I think that is the most sort of common touchstone for him. And you feel like he's been trying, even now, like last 10 years, like addressing that and distancing himself from that a little bit, being like, no, I'm just a songwriter, and I create songs. I'm not how I've been presented in the culture.
Well, yeah, it's amazing because he's such a contradiction, because so many things about that period reinforce the idea of creating a very strong archetype of something, and even let's take the cover for example. Like it is synonymous with what I think of 1980s America, the U.S.A, the branding of America as kind of a corporate idea, of like Pepsi Cola, America, like a certain way we picture America when we close our eyes. is that like the chicken or the egg situation? Like this,
Right.
it's just a photo of Bruce's butt in front of an American flag, you know?
Yeah. But it
Uh,
communicates so much. There's like a
yeah,
working class thing there. There's like a sex symbol thing there. There
yeah,
is a, again, like every man, whoever you are, you're welcome to the world that this record is creating. And
right.
that thing you said about America as a corporate product or corporate idea. When you read what people were writing about Bruce in the mid '80s, whether they were on the left or the right, one of the common things that comes up a lot is Bruce Springsteen is a symbol of like American ingenuity at its best. Like he delivers a product that's well made. He works hard. He's very
Yeah,
competent at his job. And,
yeah,
people were feeling that America wasn't competent at a lot of things
yeah,
at that time. And
yeah.
so that was how he was talked about. And there's a double-edged sword to that, obviously, because they're praising him, but they're also reducing him, to this rah-rah idea. And I think that was
Yeah.
part of what he ended up reacting against.
Well, it's funny. There is so much striving and working and trying going on with Bruce Springsteen, and then 10 years later, you have the grunge movement of it's lame to care, and
Right, right.
the contradiction of Bruce, in those stadium shows where he's really like pushing it hard, and he's fully in it, that became corny to care and try that hard and prance around that way,
And
and look to
there's
be
a
having
lot of
so much
people,
fun.
right, yeah. And there's a lot of people who still think that's corny. I mean, I have friends who hate Bruce Springsteen,
Yeah,
and they'll clown him all the time. And there are, he like the saxophone and the
yeah,
facial expressions and the
yeah,
raspiness and the
yeah,
sleeveless shirts and all this stuff. Like there
yeah,
are things that you can poke fun at if
yeah.
you
I
if you
mean, if
want
you
to.
want, let's take a minute and like goof on Bruce a little bit, because I think that could change the mood a little bit. First of
Yeah.
all, like I think the past several years of touring, there is like I saw him like 10 years ago. It was great. I was singing along the whole time. It was so fun and so moving. But when I see videos of him now, it feels like I wouldn't have as much fun, because it feels a little too much like he's the host of a Bruce Springsteen party. Like there's a lot of like it struck me, and maybe he was doing this 10 years ago, but he's doing Born to Run maybe, or something from Born to Run, and he's smiling and he's letting the audience sing half the song and he's having fun, and they seem totally disconnected from the song itself. You know what I mean? Where the
Yeah.
song lyrically and emotionally is a painful, confessional, dramatic song that if you look at him at the Hammersmith 1975 or No Nukes or something, you see like a guy fully invested in what that song is about. And now it's sort of like a trip down memory lane. It could be, it could be Herman's Hermits out there singing Mrs. Brown, like, come on, everybody, baby, we were
Yeah.
born to run,
I
and there's
mean,
a little less of his investment in the song,
I think for a
maybe.
song like that, you could make that accusation. I will say that I think the more recent songs that he was playing, and this is probably true of like most artists of his
Mm-hmm.
vintage, the songs that people care less about are the songs that the artists care more about. And there's like a lot of mortality songs on like Letter to
Yeah,
You that he's playing on this tour that I think he is invested in. But
right.
there is a moment, and I think he does this every night on this tour, because I saw him last year and I loved it. I thought it
Yeah.
was great. But
I'm sure I would love it. I mean, I'm sure I would. And I'll let you finish there, but it was also like, I think when you're watching fan videos of, people's cell phones, things are super bright. Have you noticed this? Like
yeah,
it can't be as bright as it looks on these phones when you're there. Like it feels so, blown out but anyways, so I'm watching it in the worst possible conditions,
well,
to make this a
too,
point.
this would support your case. Like, there's a moment I think in every show where they do 10th Avenue Freeze Out in
Yeah.
the encore, and Bruce rips open his shirt,
Yeah.
And he's stalking around with his shirt open,
Yeah.
and like his taut old man pectorals are like poking out at you, and he looks like one of the Expendables, that from that Sly Stallone movie.
How often do you think Bruce gets his haircut these days? Have you noticed this haircut of his? Is he like going to be in the zone of interest too? Is that what he's going for? I want to go for the Adolf Eichmann.
That's so funny. I hadn't thought about that, but you're totally right. The zone of interest haircut. He saw his zone of interest, and he's like, "Oh, I like the haircut. I want that haircut."
You think it's too much to go out there in that Nazi uniform? It looks so good. Yeah, Bruce, I don't think that's a good idea. I think maybe not the look you're going for. All right. But I mean, what about him and Stevie? Him and Stevie with like the Three Stooges routine that they've been doing on stage too, where they're like patting each other on the head, doing the slaps. What's that?
Right.
Where's that coming from? Is that just? It seems consistent, right? Are they doing that a lot?
There's always, I feel like he does a lot of that shtick. Well, he did it with Clarence, obviously, when he was alive. There was like a Clarence and Bruce shtick, and then he would do it with Nils Lofgren. Like Nils Lofgren doing like flips and rolling around.
Really?
And, yeah, because he's a gymnast.
Oh, is he? I didn't know that.
Yeah, I don't know if he still does the flips, but I feel like there's a moment every show where he plays a guitar solo and he's just like spinning really fast while he's doing the guitar solo.
Right. I never liked the Nils Lofgren like look, with the big top hat.
Right.
And I don't like. This is so pointless to care about, but I don't like that he's like a finger. He plays with his finger. He plays with his thumb or something. Like there's annoying things about Nils Lofgren to me personally.
There is an element of Bruce, and this is also true, I think, of like Jagger and maybe even McCartney. Not true of Dylan. Like Dylan makes no attempt to hide the fact that he's in his 80s. You see him live. He's a man in his 80s. He sings like that. The songs reflect that, and I think it's one of his strengths that he's aged.
Yeah.
He's not trying to be
sure
Dylan in 65.
And there's no trip down memory lane with him. There's not an oldies review. Like if you go see Dylan now, he's doing 70% new record or 60% new record, which I love.
And if he's playing old songs, he's playing them in his current style. He's not trying to sound like the 70s. Yeah. Whereas Springsteen and someone like Jagger, they have this need to show that they have this physical vitality still. And they do. They're both still amazing performers. I saw the Stones a few years ago. I'm defending the Stones again, but I thought they were great. Jagger's like, he has the weirdest body ever. But, there is this need with Springsteen, like just like with his body, to prove like, no, I'm still what I was. In a way, that goes back to Born in the USA, too, because that was like the first time where he was pumping iron and he was muscular. Like you look at Bruce in the late 70s, and he's like a scrawny guy. And then with Born in the USA, he's, a few years before that, again, a very 80s type thing. He's like pumping iron every day. Yeah. And now he's like this muscle-bound dude. And yeah, like people don't want to see Bruce Springsteen be an old man. Even though we know he's older, he still has to kind of present this image. And yeah, I don't know how long you can maintain that. I wonder how long he's going to be able to do shows on this level, if he will ever transition to like what Dylan is doing, where he's playing theaters and it's more laid back.
Yeah.
But that doesn't seem like, you'd feel like physically he'd have to do that, but it doesn't seem in line with his philosophy as a performer.
I think if he looks at that Broadway show as like a way to do something where he can sit down and then tour that show, I'm sure that's on the table. But let's do this for a sec, Steve. We're gonna take a short break and continue talking for a few more. If you got a few more, you got some time?
I got as much time as you need.
Okay,
yeah.
Let's talk another like 20 minutes, 30 minutes or so. But we'll put that up on the Patreon. Let me get to some of these questions. All right, we're back with Steve Hyden. We're talking about his new book, There Was Nothing You Could Do. Can I ask you quickly about that title? Is that a lyric?
Yeah, it's from my hometown.
I can't remember.
A lot of fights between the black and whites. There was nothing you could do.
Oh, yeah.
Cars in the light. Yeah.
Saturday night. I'll do my Bruce.
That's my favorite song. on the record, I think.
Well, let's talk about the record. Why not?
Yeah.
I think I got to say, I think it's the best side B of maybe any record.
Yeah.
Listen to this side. Where does it start with? No Surrender.
Yeah.
No Surrender. Bobby Jean. I'm Going Down. Glory Days. Dancing in the Dark. My Hometown. Come on, that's a side A.
Best side B of any Bruce record or any record by anybody.
I mean, that's just nonstop.
Yeah. Yeah, I love side B.
I love Bobby Jean. I mean, that song hit me late. I think my third or whatever, fourth Bruce Renaissance was during the pandemic, because I think you gave me a little crap for this, if I remember. I was doing lots of long walks during the pandemic, and one of my companions was the Bruce live record, the 75 to 85.
I wouldn't have given you crap for that.
I thought I thought it was you, maybe it was somebody else, but somebody was saying that there's much better. That's not a great live compilation.
Well, there's, if you want to get persnickety about it, there's some things like overdubs on that record. Like the drum sound, I think, has been really treated. So like even the songs from like 75 or 78 where they're playing a club or an arena just sound like they're playing in a stadium. And then there's some edits to some of the songs, like the version of Backstreets is cut down from like 13 minutes to 5 minutes. But these are all nitpicky complaints.
Yeah.
If you just listen to that record in a vacuum, it's like a fucking great record.
Yeah, and it's a great story because it goes from the early, it does go from the club shows to the arenas to the stadiums.
Right. The version of The River on there with the story at the beginning, which I write about in the book.
The story at the beginning, this is the story about his dad and Vietnam, right?
Yeah.
I mean, folks, if you're a man or a woman or non-binary, whatever, if you want to get that, there's things that choke me up in life are, obviously any animal being killed intentionally. But mostly it's like father-son showing love for each other. Like if you can get a scene in a movie or anything where you're showing the love between a father and a son in an emotional way, that's going to get me, right? Yeah. This story Bruce tells about his dad, where Bruce and him were not getting along, and just listen to it. It's on the live record, and it's the intro to The River, and it's great. It's a beautiful story. But there's a lot of Born in the USA on that. I think the version of Bobby Jean on that live record is spectacular. Mm-hmm. And it's funny, on the last couple of very good band tours I did, which I think you were at one of those, right?
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
In St. Paul.
We got to say hi afterwards.
Yeah.
One of my joys of that tour is turning my bass player, Ellie, onto music because she grew up listening to a lot of jazz and classical. She kind of comes from that school, and then kind of skipped a lot of classic rock, just kind of didn't have it in her life. And so she doesn't know a lot of Dylan. She doesn't know a lot of Bruce and that kind of stuff. But she's interested in it. And so I will sometimes go, all right, you put the headphones on. I'm going to play you something, And I played her Bobby Jean, and she was just like, wow, this is so dramatic. It's so intense. Like if you're coming to that without context and without, come with fresh ears as somebody that loves music, it is kind of shocking how big and dramatic it can be, Bobby G, dum, da dum, da dum, da dum, da dum. It's almost like like Beethoven or something, or like Wagner in just how serious it is. About a friendship, about like loss and a friendship ending, and I guess maybe about Stevie Van Zandt.
That's the story with that. And Bruce really is a master of platonic love songs about men.
Yeah.
Like where he sings about loving a man in a very earnest, sincere way. You know, there's
Right.
a lot of examples of that. Bobby Jean is one of the greatest. Backstreets is another one that's probably my favorite Bruce song of all time. And
Yeah.
that's another one where he's singing about that. And that is one of the beautiful things about him, that he is, on one hand, you know, they look at him as like this macho, conventionally masculine archetype of a guy in the mid 80s. And yet he's also someone who's like, I will sing about how much I love my friend. And it'll be more romantic than my love songs.
Yeah, like the
know?
love songs at that point are kind of the silly ones. They're more of the kind of the fun rockers. I did
By the
have
way,
listening. Yeah,
I
go
was just
ahead.
gonna say, I think I saw your bass player play with Waxahachie on,
Oh yeah, yeah.
on Colbert.
Yep.
I was like,
Yep.
oh, I remember her from Tim's band.
I know she steals the show on my stage, which she's happy to do, and we'll be back at it soon. So
Yeah.
looking forward to that. I had just one stray. So I think it's one of the greatest side Bs. Side A, I mean, you've got Born in the USA, of course. Have you ever seen that video of Bob Clearmountain going through the tracks of that song? He's the guy who mixed the record.
Yeah, for sure.
The one sort of very illuminating, enlightening detail there was listening to Bruce's guitar playing on that record. There's like a anger. I think they call it the anger track, or something like that, where it's just Bruce just pounding like on power chords, basically, with his Telecaster, and it becomes like a full on punk song when you just hear that and the drums, like, and the guitar is kind of going out of tune. Like there's a lot of anger in his playing on that song.
This is what Bruce calls his primal scrub. You can hear why.
The irony of that song is it is such an angry song. It is such it's essentially a Vietnam War protest song, and it gets confused as sort of a straightforward American anthem, and gets used by the Reagan administration as a campaign rally song. With like not I mean it's this is, everyone probably knows this, but it is really funny to think and talk about. Like they're not listening to the lyrics, they're not getting any of the subtlety of the lyrics. But it is weird because
that's still happening too. That's
right.
Like I saw a story where there was counter protesters to like pro-Palestinian protesters on some college campus, and these frat guys were playing "Born in the USA"
Jesus.
at these people.
Yeah.
So it's still even now you feel like, okay, we've cleared this up.
Yeah.
Haven't we? But no, there's still people that hear it that way. And it's because of the music. The music, it's
so
angry.
anthemic. Yeah.
It's so uplifting. And the chorus, if that's all you're listening to, it's like it's a fist pumper, you know? So
yeah,
people don't close read lyrics.
I mean, you can put some of the blame on the dummies, but you can put a little of the blame on the band and Bruce, because you know, sometimes the song has to match the emotion you're going for, and that one kind of it could go either way. It's sort of like that argument about sitting on the dock of the bay. Is it a happy song or a sad song? Like it is confusing to hear that song and try to get anger out of something that sounds kind of joyous.
Yeah, I think it's one of the things that makes it this fascinating, complex work of art. You know, that if it were just because there are a lot of instances where Bruce plays that live as
like
how he originally wrote it,
yeah.
Like a downbeat dirge, because he wrote it originally in the Nebraska style, and then it became this anthem because he played it with the band. And there's a critique in that song in the lyrics, but the music, there's like a celebratory thing to it. So it's like these conflicting things going on at the same time that I think adds to the power of the song, but it also, like you said, it makes it confusing. You know, like This Land Is Your Land, the Woody Guthrie song, I think has a similar thing where that's like a happy-go-lucky sing-along, but he's also writing lyrics that are critiquing America. And if you get past the opening verses that no one ever sings, it turns
Right.
into more of a critique type song. Just to go back to what you were saying about like the isolated tracks and how raw the performances are on the record. One thing that I think is really interesting about Born in the USA, and it hadn't really occurred to me until I started writing this book, is that the songs that made the record were all recorded pretty quickly. And there weren't really set arrangements. They were playing live.
Yeah.
So as slick as this record is looked at as being, it actually has like a pretty raw live core to it.
I mean, the first half of the record certainly feels that way with Darlington County and Working on the Highway. Those feel like just rave ups that they could, probably get away with a 2-take situation. Just give me a little bit of a rockabilly. Come on, Max, give me some, 1, 2, 3, 4. And then just
but even like Glory Days, you can hear little Steven like yelling in the background, like that feels like a pretty live song. Can I just say, like, I don't know how you feel about Glory Days.
Yeah, I love it.
I love that song too. I feel like people shit on that song a lot. And writing this book really affirmed my appreciation of Glory
Days. I love it. I love musically. I love it. I love. I was going to talk about that because I'm going to bring up the lyrics to it because there's the lyrics to this song are so good. Listen to this. I mean, think I'm going down to the well tonight and I'm going to drink till I get my fill. And I hope when I get old, I don't sit around thinking about it, but I probably will. Yeah, just sitting back, trying to recapture a little of the glory of, well, the time slips away, leaves you with nothing, mister, but boring stories of glory days. Like, that's fucking profound to talk about age and perspective. And, it's similar to the Tony Soprano line about, what does he say about remember when is the lowest form of conversation, like that's the same, this idea that will I end up just being a collection of memories that I have about a time that I thought was better than it is now. It's a pretty profound and heavy song, a lyric idea for something that is also at the same time incredibly poppy, incredibly light and airy in a fun way, where the video is the bar band and people dancing. And, it's like, you're talking about some existential shit here, Bruce.
Yeah. I also love just how, this is something he does over and over again, but how he can sketch characters who feel very clear without a lot of words, like where he talks about the pretty girl that turned all the boys' heads, and then they're reminiscing. She put the kids to bed. She's talking about like how her and her husband just split up and all this stuff. And it's just a few lines, but you could picture it in your head, them having this conversation. It's such a vivid description, and he's the master of that.
I love it. It's like just that specific detail of this woman that puts her kids to bed and then goes down the street to the bar feels like this is a community. This is a small community in a way that she's probably not a drunk. She's not. It says more about where she lives than maybe her, She's, and again, this line, she says when she feels like crying, she starts laughing, thinking about, God damn, like so economical in his choices and language. I did have a note on Born in the USA lyrics, though. He beautiful all the way through. And at the end, he says, I'm just a cool rockin' daddy in the USA. What? You don't sound like one. Like, what do you mean you're a cool rockin' dad? Are you suddenly Bruce Springsteen now? Like, or you were a character a second ago, a Vietnam vet, and now you're a cool rockin' daddy. Where'd that come from? But that's nitpicking.
Sometimes I wonder, like, is the guy losing his mind in the song? And is he like, like the end of Doctor Strangelove where the guy's on the back of the bomb just like waving his cowboy hat around? Like maybe he's losing his mind by the end and he's like on a motorcycle going over a cliff or something.
I was curious if you thought he was, is he in jail, this guy? Because at the end he says, down in the shadow of the penitentiary out by the gas fires of the refinery, I'm 10 years burning down the road, nowhere to run, ain't got nowhere to go. I guess he's not in the penitentiary. He's down in the shadow of the penitentiary.
Yeah, it's like almost like a foreboding thing, maybe that
Yeah.
he's gonna do something wrong. I mean, that's definitely in line with the kinds of songs he was writing for Nebraska. People that are contemplating, sticking up a gas station or something.
Yeah.
I wanted to like bring up a song from side A, Downbound Train, because this song was not a hit,
Yeah.
not a single, but I feel like it has an outsized influence on younger bands. Like I've heard multiple people cover the song. Kurt Vile does a cover of that song.
Right.
I feel like there's other example of it. And it's a great song lyrically.
Yeah.
And musically, I feel like a lot of bands that tip their cap to Bruce Springsteen sound like that song the most. More than like Born in the USA.
Right.
That Fender guitar sound mixed with the synths.
Yeah.
I don't know. I feel like that invented a lot of things that
It's all
subsequent
there.
bands took from.
Yeah,
It's not a hit.
It's not a hit. It's not like the catchiest tune. It kind of chugs along. But that's
I
a
love
fair
that song.
point.
That's one of my favorites, actually.
Is it?
On the record? I love the lyrics.
I'm going to get back into it. It hits at a part of the record where I'm waiting to get to no retreat, baby, no surrender. I'm on Fire is great too. You know what?
Oh yeah, I'm on Fire.
I'm on Fire is insane because what's crazy about I'm on Fire is the drums. There's a tempo to it that is. It seems like it should not work if you kind of think about it, intellectualize it. You're like this beat. It's really fast. Like
it doesn't feel fast.
It doesn't feel fast. It's really smart, interesting piece of like the way that song's constructed.
It's like a rapid, horny heartbeat or something.
Well, totally. It's an anxiety. It's so much anxiety in there. I mean, listen to this. We talked about this on Office Hours before. Sometimes it's like someone took a knife, baby, edgy and dull, cut a 6-inch valley through the middle of my skull. And then he's like, I'm not done yet. At night, I wake up with the sheets soaking wet and a freight train running through the middle of my head. I mean, those lyrics on a record that was, is akin to like being given out at Kmart, like sitting next to Thriller and, Rumors and stuff like that. Like, I just love that when you actually dig into what's going on this record is like very heavy existential dark stuff that's coated in a little bit of candy to get the medicine down, I guess. But
well, and this is the thing that we were talking earlier about people that don't get Bruce Springsteen. They look at him as like this corny, crowd-pleasing entertainer, and those of us who love Bruce are like, no, you got to dig in deeper. He is like an intense, depressed, angry guy. He's a loner, and he's writing these songs that are coming from like, an outsider point of view. Like he's not part of American culture or the community that he sings about. Like he's definitely on the outside looking in. But that's like, I love that duality, that you hear it on this record, the happy music and the sad lyrics, it's just throughout the record.
Yeah.
It's just the formula that he was a master of. And just the duality in Bruce's image versus who he was in real life. It's what makes him such a fascinating dude to think about. And,
we haven't even really talked about the E Street Band, but the way that even all the contradictions that go with this idea of him being a loner and such an individual artist, but then putting together one of the great bands of all time. I mean, they're up there. I think every member is so strong and such a part of the appeal. You have the audience identifying with them, and the way the history and of Clarence Clemens with him, and the family that he had built. Even though while he's on his own, kind of as the individual loner, there is this. What a fun band to look at and listen to, and how they interact with each other.
Yeah, and I think the band is they're the through line on Born in the USA. They're the ones that make that record sound cohesive. Because like even Bruce himself, like Bruce has always, when he's written about this record or talked about it, he's expressed a lot of ambivalence about this album, even after it became hugely successful.
Yeah.
I think in part because he worried after the fact that maybe he went a little too pop. But he also
Mm-hmm.
has talked about how he thinks the record's a grab bag. Like, he doesn't look at it as a consistent set of songs, which I think
Right.
is kind of crazy. Some songs are weaker than others, but I think it's a pretty strong record. But I think just the sound of that band, they're the
Yeah.
ones that make it sound like of a piece.
I mean, look at, like, I think I saw some crazy YouTube video that I thought was kind of interesting, that you can look at Darkness on the Edge of Town as like a mirror from side A to side B. I don't know if you've ever heard that theory, that like the song, there's like every song on side A is like a contradiction or like the opposite of the song on side B at the same place. Like it gets into that kind of like a little too crazy, but clearly I think that record, is a case of Bruce making like a conscious effort to have a theme and tell a story kind of through the record. But I think this record, I mean, look, you got first Born in the USA. If you just said Born in the USA and My Hometown, Glory Days, working on the highway, you're starting to get like a theme about like looking at men in America and in the 1980s, like it doesn't have to be that detailed to see sort of like that he's singing about a lot of the same things.
Yeah.
And musically there's a clear cohesive quality to the record for sure.
Yeah, for sure. And, it's interesting to think about too, like Steven Van Zandt leaving the band right before the record comes out. And that's why like Patty ends up in the band. And that's how Bruce and her end up. Like even this thing that I think in the moment must have seemed like a huge loss, losing Steven Van Zandt, because he's such a pivotal part of the band, that ended up working out for the best, especially since he came back later on when they reunited. You have Nels Lofgren and Van Zandt in there now. And then the woman that he ended up, marrying and mother of his kids.
It creates a whole arc.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But yeah, you're right. I mean, again, like that, he's a loner, but he's also part of like the ultimate like community type rock band. Like you see them on stage and you're like, oh yeah, like they need to be together. They need to be here to help Bruce deliver these songs.
And they needed to break up when they broke up. They needed to come back together. Like it's all the process. And
I mean, we haven't talked about the wardrobe of the East Street Band over the years, and like how in the mid '80s it was pretty awful. Like when it is interesting listening to Bruce live recordings versus seeing them play like on video, because there are certain eras. Like if you see like a video of Bruce in the East Street Band on the Darkness tour, it's like hard as hell. It's like, oh, these guys look awesome. They look like the cast of The Sopranos on stage. It's
right.
But like in the mid '80s, sometimes you can listen to a recording and be like, this is amazing, and then you see the video and you're like, I don't know.
Are they wearing like short shorts? Are they going like Bob Weir style? Are they?
It's like Cosby sweaters and that kind of thing. Like Roy Bittan just wearing full-on sweaters.
Professor Roy Bittan. Yeah, he must have. Well, it's that thing about, and you must know the feeling of like I feel this way. Like you get to your mid 40s, you're like, what am I supposed to wear? Like, what am I making a decision for the rest of my life? Like. Am I jeans and t-shirt guy? Am I going to try to look good? Do I is there any case to wear a suit at any point in my life? If it's not a funeral,
right,
or a wedding, like I guess it must be hard for all those guys. Like, what is my identity on stage? How do I present myself? Am I John Fogerty? Am I,
Well, I mean, like Van Zandt has been pretty consistent with the gypsy pirate look.
He's got
it. He's got it on lockdown. You were talking earlier about relating to certain records as you get older and hearing them in a different way. And one thing I do like with a lot of these classic rock bards, that we love, is I like to think about, well, I'm this age now, like what were they doing when they were my age? And when I was writing this book, I had a epiphany with the record Lucky Town.
Okay.
Because I was listening to that record and looking at the cover art and just being like, oh yeah, this is Bruce. He's in his 40s. He's a suburban dad now. And he's just walking around with like one button buttoned on his shirt. And I'm like, I think I've done that a few times. Like on the weekend if I'm just feeling kind of lazy, if it's sunny outside. So it
What
just
is
made me
you got Lucky Town, and what's the compendium to that?
Human Touch,
Human Touch. So
which is not good, but Lucky Town I'll defend. I think Lucky Town has some good songs.
So they are what's the difference between them?
Human Touch was a record that he worked on for a long time, and it was like in the studio and really labored over. Lucky Town he made basically by himself like in a month.
Okay.
So it's a much quicker record, and I think it benefits from that. Like Human Touch sounds like a record that you would have made in 1988 to try to have a hit record, but it came out
like
in 92.
Like a Don Henley record or something.
Totally.
Like very overproduced.
Right. Yeah. And he drops it like right after like Nevermind comes out and instantly dated.
Right. Okay, so if you were going to recommend, that's a good way to wrap it up. Maybe I don't know. Does anyone listening need an entry point for Bruce at this point, or is it I've been telling people actually to look at that No Nukes concert just because of how fun it is and how it's very well shot, it's very well documented, and it does give you I think it shows how fun and dynamic he can be, and you can't deny the virtuosity of it all. But what do you tell people? They're like, I don't know about Bruce Springsteen, and you can't say Nebraska.
Yeah, I usually say Darkness.
Yeah,
just because I feel like it's such a lean and hard hitting record. Because I would say Born in the USA. I mean, I think that's a good entry point too, but it's maybe a little too famous. Maybe I feel like a casual person probably knows Dancing in the Dark and may not be into it. But Darkness doesn't really have any hits on it, but they're all amazing songs. And
I could play Anybody Racing in the Streets, and I think you'd have to say that's a beautiful song.
Right. Or the title track. I mean, brilliant song. Or any of those songs are amazing. Factory, yeah, Streets of Fire, yeah, it's just an amazing album. So that would probably be the one. That's probably my favorite. I don't know.
Me too.
Yeah,
it is. I always say that's my favorite. I feel like it is so tight, and the Racing in the Streets I think is my favorite song maybe by anybody, just because I love that story. I love the melody. I love simplicity of it, and so that record wins. And then what do you think, what's past 20 years, Bruce, that still matters to you?
I love Magic. You brought that up before. I love that record. I feel like that was him looking at the bands that he had influenced and taking a page from them. Like there's some Arcade Fire type stuff in there. You mentioned Girls in the Summer Clothes. A lot of people have compared that to Magnetic Fields.
Oh,
and I can hear that. I don't know if he literally listened to Magnetic Fields,
right?
But, just because it's like a low voice with like a '60s type melody to it, which is very Magnetic Fields.
I can hear
that. So I would say that's my favorite of the last 20 years. I like Letter to You a lot though too. I think that's really good.
Yeah, I'll give that another listen. I listened to it when it came out and was into it. I like that Western Stars record is cool. Yeah. It's just tough. It's I think somebody said this about Paul McCartney. The sad fact is Paul McCartney puts out a record, everybody listens to it once, and you probably don't listen to it ever again. Yeah. The old stuff is just too good, and there's only so much time in the day. I don't music has become so disposable, but I would like some of these records. I mean, for Dylan, I'll go back and listen to Love and Theft often. I really love that record, and I was listening to the Sinatra record the other day. It's great.
Yeah.
I think there's the late period stuff that I will return to with him for sure. But I don't know. Bruce is kind of in the category of I kind of love every 70s and early 80s Bruce, and then I appreciate and I'm glad he's working and I'm glad he's having fun, but there's nothing super essential about the past 20 years for me.
Well, in that 70s, 80s period, there's, you can listen to tracks. There's like a bunch of
Yeah.
unreleased stuff, or that stuff was
Right.
released, but like outtakes that are brilliant. There's like 4 or 5 albums of material from Bruce from that era that weren't released at the time. So there's a lot to listen to. Like with McCartney, I feel like there's still 80s albums that he put out that I'm rediscovering. Like I got into Press Play.
I was going to bring that up as a joke, as being like, you must be talking about Press to Play, but
there's some good tunes on that.
Really?
And maybe I'm overrating it because I was told it was garbage for the longest time. But I
don't know it that
like
well.
it.
I can't talk shit on it. I don't know it that well, but
it's pretty good.
This is embarrassing. Maybe 15 years ago, which is not that long ago, I had never really listened to Band on the Run. Like I just didn't have it. I knew the hits. I knew, of course, Band on the Run and Jet. But I didn't really know that record that well. I didn't have it on CD when I was a kid. Just didn't think about it very much. And then I was like, it comes up on my streaming or whatever. I'm like, whoa, this is like as good as any, this is Beatle level shit here. And I get to like experience it fresh. So there's still just so much back in the back catalog that deserves our attention, I guess. And
I mean the canon, so many things got kicked out of that, and then you have like the younger generation that comes along. I mean, like the Jokerman guys being a textbook example of that. Like younger people coming along and being like, "Oh, this is actually great," which I love to do. But it's kind of funny now that like I'm a little bit older and people are doing that with music that I grew up with.
Yeah,
and sometimes you do have a different reaction to that. People are like, the first Third Eye Blind record is the best album of the 90s.
I know.
Like, what?
I feel like sort of like there was like a Sublime thing happening this year. People were getting into Sublime. And I don't remember. I remember them being pretty dismissive or being pretty dismissive of them, I guess. Not serious music, but whatever. I now we start sounding our age, I guess.
Well, because it just goes to show that you don't get to write your own. You don't get to write the history of the music of your past. Like someone comes along and they will rewrite it. Right. And I feel like I've been doing that to boomers for a long time, and now people are doing it to me. So it's just part of how these things evolve. It
is funny how the rock, like you say, the canon. Like I really hope that. Well, I think it's already dead or dying, but like that, those 100 songs that just got plopped onto classic rock radio and became just the only thing that's on. That will start going away, and like I think the Spotify algorithms and stuff are starting to, like the one a couple years ago. I feel like everyone started getting Graham Nash's Songs for Beginners record. Sort of kind of showed up for everybody. Like I have friends of mine that I like that aren't into that kind of music, going like, "Hey, do you know this Songs for Beginners record?" Like I'm like, "Oh, something's happening where." Things that weren't in the classic rock canon are like kind of elevating up for whatever reason, and it's cool to see when that happens. But what's something you don't like? Like what's something that you hate? What's like a band? I mean, if you don't want to answer that, it's fine. But
I hate Sublime. I hate Sublime. This Sublime revisionism. I can't stand.
Right.
I don't know. I mean. I hate less things as I get older, I find. I don't know if you have the same experience, but...
Totally. I mean that goes back to the way we began the conversation with Unfrosted. I just don't have the room in my... And I've done so much stuff that where I feel like I failed or things didn't work. I do have an appreciation for like most people, I think Vic Berger says this on our show, like most people are just trying their best. And are, there's some rotten monsters out there, of course, and detestable people making garbage for all the wrong reasons, but a lot of people are just trying to do their best, and it's hard, and it's really hard to make something great. And it's so easy to just be like, oh, I don't like this. Who gives a shit? Maybe people obviously do.
And when you're young, you define yourself by what you don't like. It's all about drawing lines in the sand, and that's how you know who you are, because I'm against this, and I don't have that as much anymore. I also have this thing where I find failure a lot of times more interesting than success.
Yeah.
So if there's something I don't like, in a way, it's intriguing for me to kind of like write about it or think about it.
Yeah, for sure.
But not from a hostile place, but from a place of like wanting to understand this. Like, why do I hate this, or why is this not hitting for me? And sometimes you have to be careful, because you could talk yourself into liking just bullshit. And I think that does happen with a band like Sublime, which, look, they're fine for what they are. You know, you're smoking weed with your friends in high school.
Right.
They're the kind of band you want to listen to, but when people get a little too chin strokey about Sublime or No Doubt, or some of these, or even like the Chili Peppers, I think I have some affection for the Chili Peppers, but they have like a lot. I think they are like maybe the worst big band.
Oh, I had the greatest little tiny Bruce thing that I thought of this morning to tell you, and then we could finally wrap it up. But I think I can tell you this. It crystallizes exactly Bruce to me in one word, because Mark Maron, I was just hanging out with Mark Maron a couple weeks ago, and we were talking about, he interviewed Bruce. I guess that we were talking about, like, I was asking him, I don't know how it came up, but we were talking about it, and I was like, yeah, what was that like? He goes, well, it was funny. I'd go to his place, and it had just been Christmas, or Christmas was coming, or it had just been Christmas. And I said, oh, Bruce, it must be crazy around here. With all the visiting and family stuff, and lights are going up, and you're putting all the lights up and all this stuff. And he goes, correct. Correct. And, that's Bruce. Like, yes, correct. Let's talk about it. Like, and like, that's who Bruce is, like, before the mics, before the tape started rolling. Like, correct.
Yeah.
Like, what else? Like, intense guy. And he knows how to probably lighten it up for interviews. Like, then it was like, all right, let's talk. Like, yeah, well, when I thought about music, like, but the real Bruce is probably really intense.
Yeah.
Really, really cares, but can be very like, just get to the point. What do you want to talk about?
Right. Well, yeah, he's a 75-year-old, like 500. He's like worth $500 million, so he's like a rich old guy.
Yeah.
So I'm sure he's got some. He's the head. He's like the CEO of Bruce Springsteen Inc. So I'm sure he has some of that energy.
Correct.
Correct.
All right, man. We'll pick this up another time, but it was a joy to talk to you, and hope I see you out there on the road next time I'm coming your way.
Absolutely, man.